It didn't start with a slammed door. No screaming match. No dramatic confession. It started with silence. One of those thick, leaden silences that doesn't settle into a room so much as smother it. The kind that feels loud in your ears, like pressure building under the skin. It was 2 a.m., and we were both lying in bed, backs turned, a chasm of cold distance between us that no blanket could bridge. I couldn't sleep, of course. Hadn't been sleeping well for months, if I'm honest. I'd gotten used to staring at the ceiling, counting the grooves in the drywall, listening to her breathing just to remind myself she was still there. But that night was different. The air between us wasn't just tense, it was final. I turned toward her. She didn't move. I reached out, not even thinking about it, just instinct, like muscle memory from when things used to be easy. My hand hovered a few inches from her back, hesitating. I wasn't even trying to fix anything. I just needed to feel something. Connection. Warmth. Proof that I wasn't imagining how far gone we already were. That's when she spoke. "I'm not responsible for your happiness, Mark." Just like that. No emotion. No apology. Like it was a fact she'd been rehearsing in her head, just waiting for the quietest moment to finally let it slip. It was delivered so calmly, so effortlessly, it took a few seconds for it to actually land. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. It wasn't just the words, it was the finality in her voice. Like she'd let go already, and this was just her way of giving me permission to do the same. For a while I just laid there, stunned. My hands still hovering in the space behind her. She never turned to look at me. Just stayed facing the other way, like she couldn't even stand to see what that sentence had done to me. I don't know how long I stared at the ceiling after that. Long enough for my heart to stop racing. Long enough for my mind to start replaying everything that had led to this moment. The last few months. Maybe even the last few years. All the little signs I'd ignored, all the chances I'd given us to fix what we never really admitted was broken. Eventually, I got out of bed. I moved slowly, like I was afraid the floorboards might betray me. I grabbed the first clothes I found, jeans, a hoodie, and got dressed in the dark. I didn't pack a bag. Didn't check my phone. Didn't even grab a charger. Just left. Quietly, like a man slipping out of a hotel room he was never supposed to be in. The house looked different at night. Colder. Like it had already begun adjusting to life without me in it. I passed through the hallway, past the photos on the wall, smiling faces from a better time, now looking back at me with something I couldn't quite name. Maybe pity. I opened the front door and stepped out into the night. The air was crisp, the kind that bites a little when you breathe it in. The street was quiet, our little suburban cul-de-sac, wrapped in darkness and routine. Porch lights off, curtains drawn, nothing stirring except maybe a stray cat darting between bushes. I got in the car. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove. Through empty intersections and stretches of road I barely registered, letting the yellow lines and headlights guide me like muscle memory. I passed gas stations and strip malls, fast food places with drive-thrus still open, but I didn't stop. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I knew it wouldn't be her. She'd said her piece. She'd turned her back. That was the last thing she'd give me. 2 hours later, I found myself somewhere I hadn't been in over 20 years, an old campground on the outskirts of hill country, tucked between a dry creek bed and a forgotten road that used to be busy before the highway rerouted everything. My brother and I used to come here when we were kids, back when summers felt like they might never end. Back when life still had edges you could trust. I pulled off the road and drove down the gravel path, headlights cutting through the brush. There were still a few old cabins, worn down and leaning into themselves like tired men. But toward the back, I saw one trailer lit from the inside, soft yellow light glowing behind faded curtains. Jim's place. He was still alive, apparently. I hadn't seen him since I was 16. But when I knocked, he opened the door like he'd just been waiting on someone. "Well," he said, looking me up and down. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Yeah," I said, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. "Didn't expect to be here." He didn't ask why I'd come. Didn't ask what happened. He just nodded once and stepped aside. "Cots in the corner. You know the drill." And that was it. He went back to his recliner, picked up a paperback novel, and flipped to his bookmarked page like I was just another lost soul passing through. Which I guess I was. I laid down on that old cot, wrapped myself in a scratchy wool blanket, and listened to the night sounds through the thin trailer walls. Crickets. Wind through trees. A coyote howling somewhere far enough away not to be a threat. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not relief. Just stillness. Like the world had finally stopped spinning out from under me long enough to catch my breath. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't think about what I was going to do next. I just lay there in the dark, letting the quiet hold me. And maybe that was the moment I knew. This was really the end. The first full day I spent out there, I didn't say more than 10 words to anyone. Jim brought me a thermos of black coffee and half a loaf of bread that tasted like it had been sitting on a counter for a week, but I didn't complain. I sat outside the trailer on an old folding chair and just stared out at the trees. Everything around me was still. Honest. No one pretending. No one expecting anything. For years, my life had been a rotating calendar of obligations, work deadlines, mortgage payments, dinner plans with people I didn't care to see, and arguments that never really ended, just paused until the next time she rolled her eyes at me for breathing too loud. But here? No clocks. No passive-aggressive sighs. Just the creak of the trailer when the wind picked up, and the steady rhythm of my own breath. I didn't realize how much noise had been in my head until it finally stopped. I didn't turn my phone on for days. It was buried at the bottom of my duffel bag, probably overheating in the Texas sun, and I let it stay there. I didn't want to see her name. I didn't want to read whatever carefully worded texts she'd crafted in the hours after I walked out. I could already picture the progression in my head. First confusion, then guilt, then maybe anger, and eventually, some twisted version of remorse that sounded more like a sales pitch than an apology. Because that's how it always went with her. Every emotional moment was transactional, an exchange of guilt for pity, silence for attention. I used to think I was just tired, worn out. But the longer I sat with myself, the more I realized it wasn't just exhaustion. It was erosion. I had been slowly worn down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the guy I used to be. That second morning, I looked in the mirror, one of those tiny ones screwed above the bathroom sink, scratched and fogged, and I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. Unshaven. Eyes hollowed out. Not sad, just vacant. Like someone had scooped out all the parts that used to matter and left behind the shell of a husband who'd spent years asking for scraps of affection and calling it love. You start to believe that's all you deserve after a while. You stop asking for the real stuff, the passion, the laughter, the just because kind of love, and you start settling for the bare minimum. A smile here, a compliment every few weeks, her hand brushing yours in a grocery store. You build a whole narrative around that single moment like it's proof you're still okay. But you're not. You're just surviving. And I was done surviving. By day 3 I cracked. I turned my phone back on. 17 messages. 4 missed calls. 2 voicemails. The texts were exactly what I expected. The first few were casual, like maybe I'd just gone for a long drive and would be back for dinner. Then they turned sharp, demanding to know where I was and why I was ignoring her. Somewhere in the middle came the desperate ones. Please, Mark, I'm scared. Just tell me you're okay. And then came the long ones. Walls of text, full of pseudo-introspective thoughts about how she realized some things and had been taking me for granted. But all of that had only arrived after I left. Not once in the past 6 months had she ever looked at me like she saw me slipping away. Not once had she touched my hand at the dinner table just to feel close. No, her realization only bloomed when the house got quiet and she couldn't hear me walking down the hall anymore. She missed the sound of me, not the man himself. And that's when it really clicked for me. She didn't miss me. She missed the convenience. The emotional sponge she could wring out after a long day. The one who fixed the garbage disposal without being asked. The one who smiled when she rolled her eyes, who said, "It's okay," every time she forgot a birthday or an anniversary. She missed the husband-shaped utility that made her life easier. But I wasn't her utility anymore. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Not because I was playing games. I didn't respond because for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I mattered. Out here, no one expected anything from me. And in that freedom, I was learning what it meant to value myself without needing someone else to validate it. I spent the rest of that week reading old paperbacks left behind in the trailer, drinking bad instant coffee, and letting the sun burn the color back into my skin. I walked a lot. Through the trees, down to the creek, across the abandoned hiking trails that hadn't seen feet in years. I found a rhythm again. The pulse. I started breathing easier. Laughing at stupid things Jim said. Remembering what my own voice sounded like when it wasn't trying to keep the peace. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side of all this, but I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back to the life I had before. That version of me, the one who begged for attention with a quiet smile and an aching heart, he was gone. And I wasn't going to resurrect him just because she suddenly decided to remember my name. If she wanted closure, she could write it in a journal. I was finally figuring out how to be whole again. It was late afternoon on the third day when the knock came. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft tap-tap on the trailer door. I almost didn't answer. Part of me figured it might be Jim checking in, or maybe someone who'd taken a wrong turn off the highway. But something in the rhythm of the knock felt familiar. So I stood, stretched, and opened the door. And there she was. I hadn't seen her in at least a decade. Maybe more. Last I heard, she'd moved back to the area to be closer to her folks after her own marriage imploded. She used to be this whirlwind of energy in high school, bare feet on dashboards, mixed CDs with sad indie songs, big brown eyes that always looked like they knew something you didn't. Didn't expect to see you here, I said, genuinely surprised. I could say the same, she smiled, brushing a piece of wind-blown hair from her face. I was out this way, saw the car. Figured it had to be you. You were the only person I knew who used to come out here for peace instead of parties. We stood there for a second. I stepped aside and motioned her in, but she shook her head. Come sit outside. It's too nice to waste. So we sat on the porch, two old folding chairs facing the woods, a chipped thermos of coffee between us. She poured us both a cup and leaned back like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The familiarity was strange. Comfortable. Not forced. She asked what brought me out there, and I told her, most of it, anyway. I didn't need to paint the whole picture. She caught on quick. When I got to the part about walking out, her expression softened in a way that wasn't pity. It was recognition. Yeah, she said quietly. Sometimes the silence is louder than the shouting. She told me a bit about her own story. Divorce. A kid, 8 years old, daughter named Mia, smart as hell and too grown for her age. She talked about how the man she married had turned into someone she didn't recognize, how she woke up one day realizing she'd spent more time managing his moods than living her life. Funny how long we stay just because we don't want to be the ones who quit, she said. I nodded. That one hit a little too close. There was no awkwardness between us, no pressure to fill every second with words. We talked when we felt like it, and when we didn't, we just sat and listened to the wind in the trees. She laughed at one point when Jim came out, shirtless, to feed the raccoons he called his night crew. I hadn't laughed like that in, God, I don't even know how long. She stayed until the skies started to turn gold. Before she left, she paused at the bottom of the steps. Hey, she said, I'm not trying to intrude or anything, but if you ever want to come by. Mia's always bugging me to meet someone who doesn't suck. I chuckled. Well, tell her I make no promises. She grinned. That's the best answer I've heard all week. And just like that, she was gone. I sat outside a little longer, the fading light playing tricks with the shadows in the trees. Something had shifted in me, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't romantic. Not yet anyway. But being around Laura felt like being seen. Like I didn't have to perform. No expectations. No eggshells. I was just me. And that was enough. Back in the trailer, I finally checked my phone again. The messages had kept coming. My wife had gone from worried to furious to poetic. There were apologies, promises, declarations that this wasn't the end. Some texts bordered on pleading. Others were clearly written in moments of rage, accusations that I was being cruel, dramatic, immature. And then there was one that simply said, "I realize now how much I need you. Please come home." I stared at that one the longest. It wasn't that I didn't believe her. I think part of her really did mean it. But it didn't matter anymore. Because that realization had only come when she saw the door swing shut behind me. Not when I was lying next to her night after night, waiting for a touch, a word, a sign that I wasn't just another part of the furniture. That realization came too late. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't, not anymore. I'd crossed that line already, the one where love turns into something else. Not hate. Just absence. A hollow space where something used to live. I turned off the phone again, slid it under my pillow, and lay back down. I thought about Laura. About the way she looked when she sipped her coffee and listened with her whole face. About her daughter, Mia, and how strange it was to picture myself playing cards with a kid or helping fix a bike chain on a Saturday afternoon. I wasn't planning the future. I wasn't imagining some great rebound story. But for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I might actually get to live. 2 weeks passed like that. Mornings with weak coffee and cool air, nights lit by campfires and the occasional distant howl of coyotes. I'd grown used to the rhythm, the quiet, the space, the feeling of existing without being examined or graded or diminished. I'd fallen into a version of myself that I hadn't seen in years. Someone calmer, still present, but I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. One Thursday morning, I stood in front of Jim's trailer with a half-packed duffel bag and a knot in my stomach. The time had come to go back. Not to return. Not to repair. Just to collect the pieces that still had my name on them. The drive back into Austin was strange. The closer I got to the city, the heavier everything felt. Each mile seemed to pull at my chest, as if the weight I'd managed to shake off was trying to settle back in again. The traffic, the fast food signs, the sight of familiar intersections, it all looked the same, but I wasn't. I pulled into the driveway just before sunset. The porch light was already on. That was new. She used to forget about it half the time. The front steps had been swept, and there was a candle flickering in the window. Some slow jazz was playing inside, low and deliberate. I already knew what this was. I didn't knock. It was still my house, technically. I stepped in and immediately felt like I had walked into a stage set, everything perfectly arranged to simulate warmth. There were fresh flowers on the table, my favorite dinner warming in the oven, and a bottle of wine breathing on the counter. She stepped out from the kitchen wearing the same sweater I bought her on our 5th anniversary. The one she never wore. Her hair was done, her makeup soft. She smiled like we hadn't been on opposite sides of a silent war. "Hey," she said, like I'd just come back from a work trip. I nodded. Didn't say much. We stood there for a few moments, both of us waiting for the other to break the silence. Finally, she gestured toward the table. "I made dinner," she said. "I thought maybe we could sit talk." I shook my head gently. "I'm not here for that." Her smile faltered. She looked down at her hands. "I get it. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I've been thinking. A lot. And I want to try. I want to fix this, Mark. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes." I let her speak. I listened. I watched her eyes flicker, trying to find the version of me who might have said yes. But he wasn't there anymore. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm not here to punish you. I just came to get my things." Her eyes welled up. "You don't even want to talk about it?" "There's nothing left to talk about," I said. "Everything that could have been fixed should have been fixed when I was still sleeping next to you." She stepped closer, desperate now. "You said you wanted to feel seen. I see you now, Mark. I swear I do." And maybe she did. But only after I was gone. Only after the absence set in and the comfort wore off. People don't change out of love. They change out of loss. And the version of her that now stood before me wasn't someone I trusted. Because it wasn't born from clarity. It was born from panic. I walked past her, up the stairs, and into the bedroom we used to share. The bed was made perfectly. Too perfectly. Like a showroom, not a memory. I opened the closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Packed only what mattered, Clothes, laptop, some books, an old photo of my brother and me from a camping trip years ago. I didn't want the rest. Let her keep the house. Let her keep the furniture. All those things were just set pieces from a life that had already ended. As I headed for the door, she followed me, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to keep something from falling apart. "Where are you going to go?" she asked. "I've been somewhere," I said. "Somewhere quiet." She hesitated. "Is there someone else?" I didn't lie. "There's someone who listens," I said. "Someone who doesn't make me feel like I'm just part of the background." She blinked. That answer landed harder than anything else I'd said. "I never meant to make you feel that way," she whispered. I nodded. "But you did." I paused at the door, looking around one last time. Every corner of that house held something, an echo, a fragment, a moment I used to cling to. But all I saw now were ghosts of the life I'd tried to salvage. "I'm not leaving out of anger," I said. "I'm leaving because staying would mean erasing myself again." She didn't stop me. She didn't beg. She just stood there with tears in her eyes as I walked down the steps and into the cool air. The porch light flickered behind me as I opened the car door and slid in. I didn't look back. The road stretched out in front of me, dark and open, with just enough moonlight to see by. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was finally moving forward. The cabin wasn't much, just a small square of wood and windows tucked back behind a thicket of trees near the lake, but it felt like enough. The kind of place you end up in when you're done pretending to want more. One room, a kitchenette, a bed that creaked when the wind blew too hard. No TV. No Wi-Fi. Just peace. The lake wasn't far, 10-minute walk if you cut through the clearing, and most mornings, that's where I found myself. Coffee in hand. Bare feet in the sand. Watching the ripples catch the morning light like the world hadn't already broken and reshaped me. Some days Laura showed up. Not on a schedule, not with any expectations. She'd knock, walk in with a bag of groceries or a six-pack of something cheap, and settle in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes she brought Mia, her daughter, all knees and questions and freckles. She called me Mark the Hermit, and I didn't even mind. The three of us would sit on the porch, drink too sweet lemonade, and let the minutes pass without needing to explain ourselves. There was no label, no pressure to define what we were doing. No plans for tomorrow, no questions about yesterday. Just now. Just the warmth of company that didn't come with strings or apologies. It felt strange at first, to be cared for without conditions. To be liked just for existing. I kept waiting for the shift, the moment the air would change, when someone would want more than I could give. But it never came. Not from Laura. She was just there. Steady. Solid in the quiet. One afternoon, we were sitting on the dock, feet in the water, sun sliding low behind the trees. Laura turned to me and said, "You don't have to tell me anything. But if you ever feel like saying it out loud, I'll listen." And that hit harder than I expected. Because no one had offered me that in a long time. A real kind of listening. Not the kind where someone's already crafting their response before you finish talking. Not the kind where your words get used against you later in an argument. Just space. Safe, unjudged space. So I told her. Not all of it. Not in some dramatic monologue. But bits and pieces. Nights when I'd stayed awake replaying fights in my head, mornings I'd sat in the car staring at the steering wheel, too numb to go inside. The slow unraveling. The feeling of becoming a version of myself I didn't recognize, all so I could keep something broken from falling apart completely. She didn't interrupt. Didn't offer advice. Just let the silence do the heavy lifting, her hand occasionally brushing against mine like a tether to something real. I didn't say her name, my wife's. Didn't need to. That version of the story was already buried under the weight of everything unspoken. But I could feel Laura hearing it anyway. All of it. The damage. The denial. The weight of being needed but never wanted. I started to breathe easier after that. Not immediately. Not all at once. But in pieces. Like coming up from underwater, one breath at a time. I started cooking again. Badly at first, then better. I fixed up the back deck, sanded the chairs, even planted a few herbs in a crate by the window. They died, but it didn't matter. Trying again felt good. One night, Mia asked if I'd always live out here. Maybe, I said. Why? She shrugged. It's just, you look less sad now. It caught me off guard. Kids see things adults miss because they're not trying to make everything okay. They just name what they feel. And she was right. I wasn't happy, not completely. But I wasn't drowning anymore. Sometimes I wondered if my ex ever thought about me. If she sat in that quiet house, scrolling through old photos, wondering how I'd gone so completely silent. If she regretted anything. If she meant what she said about therapy and change and all the things she listed in those long, desperate texts. Maybe she did. Maybe she even started to become a better version of herself. But I wasn't the one she'd get to prove that to. I had forgiven her. Quietly. In my own time. Not because she asked for it, but because carrying the weight of resentment didn't fit who I was becoming. Forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. It's about release. Letting go of what doesn't serve you anymore. One night, I sat outside the cabin with Laura, both of us watching the storm roll in over the lake. The air was electric, that soft hush of the world right before the sky cracks open. I turned to her and said, "You ever feel like maybe the worst thing that happened to you turned out to be the beginning of everything good?" She looked at me, eyes tired but calm, and nodded. All the time. I didn't need more than that. I don't know where this story goes from here. Maybe Laura and I stay friends. Maybe we don't. Maybe something else grows from this quiet ground we're sharing. Or maybe not. I'm okay either way. Because I'm not waiting for anyone to complete me anymore. I'm not looking for closure from the people who couldn't hold space for me. I'm not trying to prove my worth to someone who only noticed I was missing once I was already gone. She once told me she wasn't responsible for my happiness. And maybe she was right. But what she didn't realize was, neither was I responsible for holding on to a life that made me feel invisible. So I let go. And somewhere between the silence, the trees, and the porch light flickering in the distance, I finally figured out how to belong to myself again.